This is SouhanUnfiltered. We are at the Scott Trade Center. I'm Jim Souhan. I'm with Michael Russo, my buddy and my podcast partner. We are previewing Game 5 of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, Blues Wild. We're going to get to a lot of things, even some non-hockey stuff as the hour goes on. But, Michael, it's been a fascinating series to me. And I thought Ken Hitchcock, with his experience and his eloquence, really kind of captured what it's been like and why it's been so difficult for some team, for the team that gets down to come back. Why you've seen such exhaustion, why you've seen such emotional swings. You've known Hitchcock a long time. Talk about that.
Well, I think that he is, that's why media love Ken Hitchcock, because he sits there and he talks to you and he says interesting stuff that you haven't heard before. And today his talking points was to come in and really explain to us how the hell it's possible that two teams could look so vastly different in games 3 and 4. And the big thing that he talked about today, he talked about multiple things that are all kind of interweaved. But the big thing he talked about today is that this is just you have to get these teams so amped up to play one game that it's like the second you win that game, there's almost like this sigh of relief. So he said the big challenge on both coaches proved to be that you got to make sure that your team doesn't take its foot off the accelerator. And so we saw, Game 1, the Wild put everything into that game, won a 50-50 game. Game 2, they easily could have won that game, won up 2-0, but the Blues did a fabulous job of them winning that 50-50 game. And then it's like they took their foot off the gas going into Game 3, and then obviously, that was a game. Hitchcock said today, Game 3, the Wild won 3-0, could have been 6-0, if not for Jake Allen looking outstandingly. So Game 4 was the display that we saw. The other thing he said is that there's such little space on this ice, and if you watch the other playoff series, you'd notice that Game 4, it's hard to even Game 4 actually with a 6-1 game, there wasn't a ton of shots for either team. It was just a game where the Wild got poor goaltending and didn't play very well, but it wasn't like a really totally open game until the third period when both teams were just trying to get out of it and move on to Game 5. But we saw in that in this series just how tight checking, how little room there is, how they absolutely just defend the heck out of each other. And he said it's been so exhausting that he has never seen shorter shifts in his life. And I laughed at that because I even said to him the follow-up question, the presser today was, is that coach directed? Because how many times do you hear coaches complain in the NHL about guys overextending their shifts and playing too long a shift? And there it was like he was almost complaining that the shifts are too short, that they're 25 to 30 seconds. And he said, no, but it's not coach directed, but it's so exhausting for these players that 18, 20 seconds into a shift, he's seen them double down and bent over, and it's just an exhausting series. So it's kind of fascinating. Both teams say that tonight has the ability to be a heck of a game. Obviously, it's just a huge game for both teams. The Blues don't want to go to Minnesota and be down 3-2, and the Wild would love it to close it out at home and redeem itself after getting completely booed off the ice the other night.
Playoff hockey tends to be highly unpredictable. You see lots of series upsets. You see lots of games that go a different way than you might have expected. And yet, in this series, team scores the first goal, they go on to win. And I think that speaks to everything you were just talking about. And Hitchcock addressed that. I talked to Dubnyk and Parise and a bunch of other people about that today. It's like they're pouring so much into it, and they're both such intense, physical, hard-checking teams. They get up a goal. Not only does the other side have a little bit of an emotional letdown, but the other side knows they're facing a mountain. They got to find a way to score against a great checking team.
Yeah, that's the thing. These are two such well-structured teams and great defensive teams that we saw this trend in the regular season. Almost identical, Jim, records when they score first. In the regular season, the Blues were 36-6-4 when scoring first, and the Wild were 35-6-4.
Wow.
So both teams, both teams basically just they get out in front and they know how to protect leads and they know how to keep also their foot on the gas and that's going to be the challenge tonight to break that trend from whoever scores first. Don't get that letdown because it is so hard to score in this series and the other big storyline tonight, Jim, is just to see how Dubnyk responds. The real difference in last game is that he didn't make those big saves early to really keep them in a game. Then when they got back in the game and the crowd was electric, up 3-1. he lets in an awful goal to make it 4-1, and that just sucked the life out of the building and the Wild bench. And he's got to be better. I mean, that was a game the other night where the entire complexion of the game changes if he doesn't give up those early bad goals. And now the Wild, that doesn't excuse them from playing poorly that game. But I do think that the difference is that there have been times in this great second half where the Wild have come out a little flat, but he's been so good early that he allows them to get their legs under them. And that what happened the other night is that just didn't happen. So this team the other night just, it kind of looked like that team early in the season that when they weren't confident in their goaltending, they just completely, changed the way that it played and it plays. And so, that's the other thing tonight. He's got to respond. There's still, to me, going to be this time in the series where he's going to have to steal a game. Because the Wild just, let's be honest. Without the 3 empty net goals, they have 6 goals in the series in 4 games. They're not scoring. So they are going to need him to win them a 2-1 game maybe.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll go farther. I thought Dubnyk was terrible the other night. And we all know how great he's been. We all know he saved the season. Everybody wants him to be around. He's a cool guy. All that stuff is great, but he was terrible. Those are awful goals. And while hockey coaches and hockey players are always going to look toward effort and system and use the same cliches after every loss, the reality is that the goalie lost that game.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right, and that's why I was, I made that big Twitter mess up the other night because I confused everybody thinking that Kemper was in because right when Kemper gave up that awful, couldn't believe the third goal. Right, Dubnyk gave up. I did it again. Right when Dubnyk gave up that awful third goal. The first thing I did was look at Yo to see his reaction because he had to know this is on Dubnyk, and so when I saw that he didn't even look at Kemper, I tweeted out that Kemper gave up the goal. Just had it in my head, but I really think I understand why Mike didn't pull him at 3-0 because right now they got to keep this guy engaged and he is their hope. But I would have pulled him right there, and at a minimum, I would have pulled him at 4-1. I didn't get. The rationale there. My feeling is that he might have even pulled him at 3-0 coming out of the first. My guess is he also didn't want to embarrass him in front of the home fans, so let's get him through the period. We saw that after he gave up the 5th and 6th goals. He finally had to pull him. But my guess is that he would have pulled him at 3-0, even though he's not admitting that. But because of the power play in his mind, Yo's mind, he's thinking, you know what, let's get a power play goal here. Right. We're right back in this game. Right. Not ever. And then it works out perfectly. They get the power play goal. And then he gives up less than 2 minutes later, just a backbreaker, and that's a little daunting because none of us have seen what Devan Dubnyk's like after having a lousy game, and how he responds, and so that is going to be big tonight. I mean, we know that the Blues are going to test him and challenge him and get in his face and throw pucks at him from the goal line like they've done a lot in this series. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, this is not an easy team. They're going to get last change tonight. They're going to throw Backus out against Parisi. Pietrangelo, who Hitchcock said today is their best player. He's or best player in the series. That he's going to be out there all the time on Parisi. So this is going to be interesting how way Dubnyk responds here. You got to think that he's, the worst thing for a goalie is you can imagine in any sport, Jim. You being the expert that covers everything is self-doubt. Oh, and you got to worry if that is now in his mind.
And he seemed loose this morning, and I think that's his nature. He's a good guy. He likes talking to people. Now, he did have one really bad game this year with the Wild, and that was Detroit, right?
Yeah, but you know what? If you look at the 4 goals that he gave up in that game, they were all
great goals.
They were as fluky as you can get.
Okay.
One puck was going 3 feet wide, crazy redirection. One puck, I remember at the end of the first period, it was an Abdelgator goal, I think, or Eriksson goal. Jared Spurgeon didn't even try to clear the front of the net. One puck was a one-timer from that's rock star they got in the AHL. That's awesome. I forget his name off the top of my head right now.
Bobby Hull, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That one he couldn't do anything about. And then the other goal was also just a redirection that went off, I think, Fontaine's stick in the high slot. I mean, it was as fluky as you can get. So this was as bad. Michael Rand wrote a blog in yesterday or maybe it's online today, that does show and map out that Dubnyk has definitely not been as good the last 2 to 3 weeks. But I really don't, if you look at his save percentage and things like that, they have absolutely gone down. But even his save percentage that's gone down to what it was at the end of the year, he finished with a 936. He was 925 his last 10 to 12 games, but still that's pretty good for a goalie.
It is. But the next question I was going to ask is, is he showing signs of fatigue after playing for 3 months absolutely straight?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That we could always, I mean, I don't think he's showing signs of fatigue, but I think that's easily going to be what everybody's going to point to if the Wild lose in this series. I mean, but again, that's the position the Wild were in. Every game, they barely made the playoffs still. They could not go back with Kemper or Backstrom. And so they were forced to throw this guy out there every single night. And in the regular season, when he was playing these pressure-packed games, he never really showed the signs of fatigue. And, now it's a new experience in a tough climate. And, maybe, I guess there's just no way to know for sure. I can say to you, and I don't want to make excuses for these guys, but it is so clear to me that there's some sick guys on the team. I mean, if you don't believe me, go on Wild.com and watch Dubnyk and Pominville speak yesterday to us at the airport. They couldn't even talk. Pominville could barely get out words. He had such a chest cold. And I know for a fact that Dubnyk's had a chest cold for 3 days and is playing through it. He sounded much better this morning, by the way. But yesterday, just listen to him. I mean,
and he admitted today he has a cold.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses for these guys, but I don't think they're a healthy team right now. They've had 2 or 3 guys missing practice recently. There's something going around the locker room. And, since we all know that the Wild's locker room is like the breeding ground for all
infectious diseases.
Yeah, it's basically an incubator.
They avoided Ebola this year. I think that was a win.
Yeah.
As far as Dubnyk being tired, what I see is, he cheats off the post against Tarasenko in Game 2, and you wonder if he feels like he's completely spry, whether he feels like he needs a cheat in that situation. And then the goals in Game 4, I mean, I think the first goal, he just didn't get across the crease. The Reeves goal? Was that the first goal?
Yeah.
I mean, he just didn't move very quickly.
Yeah, no, that was a bad goal. But those. I'm not going to make excuses for him. I mean, he was terrible last game. But I will say that there are guys on this team that are just passengers. Vanek's been awful. Chris Stewart, to me, needs to be much, much better. I was a little surprised that Yo didn't blow up the lines today, the way that Vanek and Stewart are playing.
Did he make any changes? I think I was in a different room
he made no changes. He added Matt Cook for Sean Bergenheim. That's the only change in tonight's lineup. And I get it. I mean, in a pivotal game like this, Game 5, if you show panic and blow everything up, and then you really mess up with the cohesiveness up in a game like this, I think in the back of Mike's mind, he's like, you know what, we're better just going with the guys that have played well, that won in this building, and not completely and let their self-pride react to respond from last games rather than blow everything up and just look at last game as an aberration. I get that, but there are a couple guys here that I would hope that in the last day that Mike Yo's got in their face and said, what the fuck? I mean, honestly. Like, it is – I mean, they just need more from these guys. I mean, Stewart and Vanek in particular.
They've been terrible. And Mikko Koivu has played hard, has played well defensively, but I think I looked it up today. I can't remember the number, but like 1 goal and 6 assists his last 22 playoff games, something like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. You're right. I mean, I think he's playing well. Like, I thought I'm trying to remember now the game. Was it Game 3 or Game 2 even that I thought he was fabulous? Maybe it was Game 3. But regardless, you're right. I mean, he's technically their number one center, right? I mean, you see it again in today's line rushes. It's not Parise's line that goes out first. It's Koivu, Zucker, and Stewart. And you need him to score. I mean, you just do. I mean, he has 1 goal in 22 playoff games. It's not, it's just not acceptable. I mean, it's funny because, 2 days ago we were talking about Koivu, and I said I could sense, everybody, waiting to just pounce on him for playing terribly. And he is not playing terribly. To me, the first 4 games of the series, the only game that you could say that he was poor in was the game that everybody was poor in. But you do need him to score once in a while. And now, again, if they lose the series, you're going to go back to Game 2 and say again, just if you didn't, why didn't Koivu, it's too bad that Koivu didn't have that killer instinct on that 1 goal that he gets the open net on, and somehow Allen gets across. I mean, those are the things that in tight series, you need him to come through.
He does a lot of little things well, but when you're the captain, when you're getting paid that much money, you'd like some big things to go well too.
Exactly. But again, like I don't want to sound like a hypocrite and just kind of I mean, we were only here doing this 2 days ago at the Liffey when I was basically almost kind of making fun of some of the Wild haters that I could just sense, and they did, by the way, come out the other night just like I predicted. That were just waiting to pounce on him. And I get it, but you're right. I mean, he's just got to get more points, and it doesn't help that Stewart's not playing well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's so soft along the wall. Stewart,
he's a 240-pound man. He's their biggest body, and he plays soft on the boards.
Yeah, I mean, the other night, the amount of times in the offensive zone he was just pushed off pucks. It's not good. And then again, Zucker's playing hurt. There's clearly, I mean, just watch him.
Yeah, absolutely. One side note before we get back to more hardcore hockey talk. That's a very dangerous phrase to say quickly. Here we are in another road arena. I used to go to games at Kiel Auditorium or Kiel Center way back in the day. This is Scott Trade Arena. Every time I go to another hockey arena, I realize how good we have it in St. Paul. Man, it's like an opera house versus a roadhouse. This is just nothing else compares to the joint.
Yeah, I am there's some charm to this building, but I'm not the biggest fan. A lot of it's to do with the working conditions for us.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Which is totally selfish. But I mean, they have great fans here in St. Louis. I mean, this is a market, man, that is just dying for a championship. They've played the most playoff appearances in NHL history without a cup. And, you're looking at the banners up here and the amount of times they've won division championships and things like that. This is a market that's really starving for it. And that's why, it is funny, the complete 180 that happened the last couple days. After Game 3, the Blues media was basically talking about heads will roll, and fans were just absolutely going ballistic here with the way that they played in Game 3, and then the complete role reversal minus the heads will roll after Game 4. And so, it's been a really compelling series. Both coaches said they think that tonight's going to be the best of them all, and we'll see. Yeah. I mean, this is such a huge game. And again, I will say that if the Wild lose, the series isn't over. This team did rally back from 3-2 down.
Both teams know how to win on the road in this series, too.
And so, the Wild did rally back from 3-2 down to beat Colorado last year. But, you would just love, for the Wild to, put themselves in a position to win it at home and redeem itself. It makes for the better story. But I think, I said to you today at lunch, and I wasn't kidding. I mean, how funny. I mean, a very Minnesota Wild thing to do would be to win tonight, lose Game 6, and force a Game 7. I mean, that's just – would that not be the Wild personality to, backs against the wall, win, go home a little comfortable? I mean, that's their MO, man.
Yeah, but that's also the way this series has gone. Yep. Hitchcock has talked so much about it the last couple of days that, when two teams are this evenly matched, when it's this difficult to score, a little bit of change of emotion is going to make a big difference. And we're seeing. I mean, Hitchcock kept saying, you win and you start to feel just a little good about yourself, and all of a sudden the other team is just kicking your ass. It's remarkable. Because I think so often people on the outside of sports, fans, sometimes writers, want to pretend like it's all just numbers and robots and skill, but emotions have so much to do with it.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and I think that we might see a little of the hate tonight. I think that's part of the reason for putting Matt Cook in. We'll see though if Cook still has that in him. He's just not the same player he used to be. He's been hurt all year, and I'm not sure that he's feeling completely 100% comfortable. Mm-hmm. But I think they want to get the mentality of going in there on the forecheck and getting really just, in a position where they can absolutely, just hammer this team in the offensive zone and see if they could play a fast game in this building. The Wild looked fast in games 1 and 2, but not nearly as fast as they did in Game 3. That was unbelievable. And then Game 4, they look like, kind of the way the Blues did in Game 3. So, it's just going to be, this is like that hurry up and wait time. 4 more hours, my God, enough, Why
don't we just do a 4-hour podcast?
Yeah, exactly.
Because, I think if we got you a coffee IV, that might work.
I just, as you nearly witnessed, I almost had a meltdown when I went to Starbucks. And there's like an international robotics convention going on in town. There's like, It's like kindergarten to seniors, I think. They're having this convention over at the Edward James Stadium here, and they're just, they have taken over St. Louis. So I get to the Starbucks, and there is the Starbucks that I essentially lived at like 4 days ago. Every time I went there, they know me by name. I mean, it's really nice girls that work there. And I walk in there, and you can't even get even near the shop. There's so many people online. And, I mean, you saw me at lunch.
Nerds
I was ready
like
to fall
coffee,
asleep.
Michael.
Yeah, I know. So, I'm slumming right now. I should show people actually on Twitter what I'm slumming with. People would laugh at this because they know how much I hate Tim Hortons.
Yes. I'm a little surprised to see you. But why didn't you just use the Russo lane at that Starbucks?
Yeah, there should be a Russo lane.
There's a Russo lane.
Yeah, I did go up to one of the bartenders in the lobby bar, and I said, hey, can you just do me a favor, get me a coffee? And it's like, no. All right, thanks.
It clearly doesn't know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
One question I had about the series is, especially since I didn't cover games 1 and 2, do you think Wild fans will be populous tonight? Do you think we'll see a lot of Wild fans in this business?
I don't think probably as much just because we're middle of the week, and but I do think that that's the one thing about this building is I don't know why if Blues fans are just numb to the losing and the expecting the meltdowns and things like that. But I'm telling you, I could not believe the amount of just tickets that were. I mean, I went on Ticketmaster.com the other day because I felt bad for Wild fans that they basically couldn't get into the door at the X, and I go on there and there's they have the map on Ticketmaster.com and they have this different colorations, and basically it's like some seats, a ton of seats, a shitload of seats. There was a lot of that color. I mean, it was unbelievable. So I immediately put the link up on Twitter. So not to fill this building with Wild fans, but more of empathy. Like here, if you want to come down here, you can get into the house and you can get in for less than face value.
It's probably easier for a Wild fan to get into a game here than it is to get into one in St. Paul. That's Michael Russo. I'm Jim Souhan. You can listen to all of our podcasts and all of the podcasts I do with other guests at SouhanUnfiltered.com. You can listen to it via iHeartRadio, or you can subscribe for free at iTunes, and all the podcasts will pop up in your inbox. Last time we were together, we were at the Liffey. We're trying to do Liffey on Wednesday nights when we can. It's the Liffey right across from the XL Energy Center in St. Paul. Also, a new promotion when we do our shows from a Cara pub, whether it's the Liffey, Kieran's, or the local. We will also give away 50 free pints of Guinness to the first 50 people who come in and check in on social media and show up to hear our podcast. We're going to start doing them so they're broadcast so you can hear them if you show up live. Usually on Fridays we're at O'Gara's. We obviously aren't there tonight. We plan to be back there next Friday unless we're in Chicago or someplace else. Again, that's Michael Russo. I'm Jim Souhan. We appreciate you listening.
Did you see my buddy downstairs from the Edmonton Sun going crazy?
Yes.
Derek?
Yes.
So just imagine this guy. He's the Sun newspapers. They have writers, obviously Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, everywhere. And so what they do is they send one beat writer to pretty much every series. So he's been assigned the St. Louis, Minnesota series. So he's been flying back and forth, covering it for all the Sun papers in Minnesota, in Canada. Well, he first gets here and he's sitting up there in the press box after Game 2, and the freaking Oilers win the freaking lottery again. Yeah. So then he's got to go to work in a panic, here. And then they blow up the entire franchise today, which was the right thing to do. But Craig McTavish has essentially been fired. Kevin Lowe is reassigned, and they brought in Peter Chiarelli, the Boston Bruins GM that was just fired by Cam Neely, as the president and GM of the Oilers. So I mean, he's down flares. He's written not only 5 stories on the Oilers already from St. Louis, but he had to work the locker rooms and do because he's covering the series tonight. So he's just I do feel bad for him, and he's I mean, it is funny what they essentially did not tell McTavish. McTavish is scouting in Europe right now.
Wow.
And they call him and said, by the way, you're no longer the GM, but nobody's really feeling bad for Mac T, who, by the way, was a finalist for the Wild coaching job a couple of years back.
I remember that.
But nobody's feeling bad for him because he fired Ralph Kruger, which was a stupid thing to do, and he did it by a Skype. So nobody's really feeling too bad for Mac.
Let me bring something up.
Yep.
We all worry about process like that. Oh,
I know.
You fired somebody by Skype. Oh, you fired somebody over the phone. You know what? If you're going to fire me, just send me a text.
Yeah.
I don't want to go sit in your office and act like we're having some official meeting. You're going to fire me. Just
have you
fire
ever been
me.
fired from anything?
Well, honestly, I was working at 1500 ESPN until recently, and we could find different ways to phrase it, but basically they didn't want to pay me anymore. I think that's kind of being fired. They were willing to. They didn't tell me to go away, but they didn't want me in exactly the same role. I could have done some.
Was
things
it like
for
Office
them.
Space where you just kept on showing up and? Just...
Yes, absolutely. No, but seriously, I talk about other people being fired all the time. I should talk about it when it happens to me. I was doing the Sunday show, and it wasn't going very well. I thought the person I was doing it with was an idiot and horrible on the radio and didn't know what he was talking about, and I was forced to work with him. And it was kind of one or the other.
Oh, man.
And they didn't really want to pay me the same rate. They wanted me to pay me to do fill-ins. And I just said, hey, that's not going to work for me, and I'm done. So I could phrase it in a lot of ways, but basically I could also say I was fired.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that ever happened to me in my life, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, I've never been fired because I've had 2 jobs my entire life. I started working at the Sun Sentinel at 16 years old. And I worked there until I was 30. Mm-hmm. And then I came to Minnesota, and knock on wood, but it hasn't happened yet. So I just don't know how I'd react. I think I'd have an absolute meltdown. I don't know how people are able to kind of you were doing a side job, and obviously, Mac T and these guys, they're handsomely paid. They're not going to freak. But people that just lose their job, I feel so bad. I don't even know how you move on. Like we're all paycheck to paycheck. At least I am. It's like you're comfortable until you're not comfortable, and I just don't know how what you do. I wouldn't even know the process to begin of that. I was fired once, actually. No, when I was 15 years old, I worked at Toys R Us, and I was a cashier. And one day I went into the. Oh, I probably shouldn't tell the story because.
Did you do something with a Barbie doll?
It's gonna make me sound like I'm just like this,
This is it, the first edition of the. Yeah. I shouldn't say this, but
it's gonna just make me. It's gonna make me sound like I'm too good for manual labor.
Tell us.
But I go into the break room, and all of a sudden I see that the customer bathroom, the toilet is overflowed. And so I go and I walk back to the front of the store, and I tell the manager that the bathroom is overflowed, and he handed me a mop. And I said, I'm not fucking cleaning the bathroom. And he goes, well, if you don't clean the bathroom, you're leaving. And I'm like, well, here. I'm not mopping the bathroom. I'm like, I don't know what's in there. I'm not going. That's sorry. So
you're so soft.
I left.
You're so soft. You don't go to the boards.
I am soft. There's no doubt about it. I don't know how to change a tire. I paid somebody to change a light bulb because I didn't know how to pull the track lighting off my kitchen thing. I don't know how to fix anything. I have a buddy, Mike Roach. He called me this past winter. He asked me if I wanted to go with him snowmobiling, and I asked him if I could wear slacks. So that just shows you who I am.
Slacks, and not only that, you said the word slacks.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Say
slacks
have you ever
again.
seen slacks?
That's so funny.
Have you ever seen me not wear something like?
No, I've never seen you not
wear
in
blue
slacks.
jeans.
It's just I've never thought to call them slacks before.
Yeah, I know. I'm soft, and it started when I was 15 and handed a mop at Toys R Us. I was fired once.
I wasn't always soft, but I am now. But I worked in a factory. I worked in the smelters. I spent a summer in Indiana taking apart engines in 100-degree heat, 100-degree humidity in a field. So I can do all that stuff. I eventually chose not to.
I have a family friend. I'm friends with these 3 brothers, and their parents are 2 of my closest friends as well. So every summer I go and visit them in Edwardsburg, Michigan. It's basically outside South Bend. Mm-hmm. And it is, the man that owns the house, it's just a beautiful house, but it is, he is manual labor, right? Mm-hmm. He does everything. He basically built the house. He owns his own company. It's on tons of land. And so one day he grabs me. He comes into my room that I'm staying at the house, and he goes, hey, put on some jeans and come with me. And
you said, I only have slacks.
I'm like, first of all, can we go and buy some jeans? I didn't even think to bring jeans. So we go out in the back, and we are now freaking chopping wood. I'm chopping wood. I'm using the wood splitter. And I was, honestly, it was so therapeutic. Like, I had my phone in the house, didn't look at it. Like, I'm like, this is, and then I turned to him, and it was the loudest laugh I've ever heard in my life. And I said to him, I'm like, this honestly might be the most, like the greatest thing I've ever done. Like, I've never done anything like cool before. Like I've never done anything. Like, I was always taught you call AAA, you call the plumber,
you sound so much like me.
So I honestly, it was I couldn't believe that I was actually doing something manual,
And not wearing slacks.
Yeah.
Slacks. See, slacks is like my dad's word. My dad always, I have to go put on slacks. We're going to church. I haven't heard that word in like 40 years. That's awesome. Thank you for
I'm an old soul.
Thank you for introducing me to that classic American word. All right, time for Twitter questions for Russo, one of my favorite segments. It's almost as good as I shouldn't say it this, but, which is my favorite Russo segment.
Somebody just asked me on Twitter if I mow the lawn in my suit.
But you're like, you should be, with all your connections, you should have been an extra on Mad Men. You should have been walking around wearing your tie, mowing the lawn, telling the wife to make dinner, get dinner on the table, hon. All right.
There are a lot of people that follow me and read me that have very little respect for me anyway. The longer I do this podcast, it's like, honestly, I'm just going to be laughed at around town.
Oh, like, yeah, people are just going to point and laugh.
Yeah, I know.
Which I think I'm going to enjoy. In fact, I think
the reason why I love this podcast, Jim, is that you are like basically my psychologist now. Like anything that now, like one day, there's going to be eventually a podcast where I just cry on your shoulder, right? I mean, that's going to eventually happen.
Well, you can cry, just not on my shoulder. I'll bring it along somebody else's shoulder for you to cry. By the way, you ever watch the TV show Louie?
Yes, I love Louie.
Oh, it's great. Well, in a recent episode, he's sitting there and he's talking about all his phobias and his problems to his psychologist. His psychologist falls asleep. And of course, Louie goes, I'm such an asshole. My psychologist falls asleep on me.
Oh, my God.
It's just beautiful. All right, Twitter questions for Russo. And if you see him in public, laugh quietly. Don't hurt his feelings. Ben Feldman, one of our loyal listeners and show uppers, I am sick of ignorant fans doubting Dubnik's overall game. Doubting Dubnik over one game. This team was embarrassing in front of him. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just, it's kind of natural. I mean, just because again, this is still, I think part of it is because Wild fans have grown so accustomed that they just don't trust the goaltending in this organization the last couple of years. So they're all kind of waiting for that rug to be pulled out. And I think that, people are so looking now at like, oh my God, they know that if the Wild are going to re-sign this guy, it's going to be for a 3, 4, 5-year deal. So they're committing to him being the number one. And what if this has been all a facade, right? Yeah. I mean, so, you see something like that the other night where it was so bad. And I don't disagree with Ben at all. I think the Wild were terrible in front of him. But I also think that, that it's when you're all of a sudden, as we talked about, playing against a team where it's such an uphill climb if you're down 1-0, and next thing you're down 3-0 on some bad goals. I think it's just so hard to play that game that leads into the overall template of the game where we all think the Wild played like crap. But a lot of it is just because of the poor goaltending at the beginning. But I do agree with, hey, we'll have a better idea tonight. If he bounces back and is a rock star, there's nothing to worry about. But last night and some of the goals, I will say this, he hasn't been beaten a lot in this series other than Game 4, but the goals that he had been beaten for before, you can arguably say were pretty suspect goals.
Yes.
And so that's why, there have been a couple redirections, so I don't buy that. Like Game 1, there was a redirection. Game 2, there was a redirection by Tarasenko. But there's been the goal off from the corner from basically Tarasenko. There was the Berglund shot, which I think a lot of people thought it was kind of a bad goal. Then there were probably 4 bad goals against St. Louis the other night. So we're just starting to see cracks in which was an impenetrable goalie.
Absolutely.
Yep.
From Dan Waldron, if you are a Minnesota Wild fan, that was actually a compliment. Thank you from Dan. I don't have to read that though. Let's see. Biggest key to the game from Brian Deerhelm. I'm having trouble with my vision, so I apologize if I mispronounce your name.
Biggest key to the game, I would say, again, I mean, to me, again, it's all interlinked. But, I mean, it starts with Dubnyk. It starts with defending, and it starts with just playing out of their end. I mean, the Wild were just in their end way too much the other night, and way too much, I thought, at times in Game 2. And so they're just going to have to figure out a way to get out of there. And I think that they just have to, if they exit well, they'll get back to playing fast. If they are, poorly passing again and slipping, I counted the game. I watched the game over again the other day. I counted 6 times in the first period where Wild guys just fell unforced.
I noticed that too. Parise fell down a lot.
3 times by Parise, and one before the second goal. That's actually one where I actually had empathy for Vanek. Yeah. Vanek got a minus on the second goal the other night because he was just over the boards after Parise blew a tire in the neutral zone. So I just, so I guess I gave you about 5 different answers, but to me it starts with exiting their zone. If they exit well, they will look fast again because they'll go in, they'll get through the neutral zone and get through. The other thing they gotta defend better is, there are teams that are starting to. I don't know what it is about the Wild's game, but they're starting to stretch them out in the neutral zone. The Rangers did it to them, and they beat them twice. And the Blues did a great job of really stretching them out the other night, and they've got to stop that.
One thing I noticed was the Wild didn't have any easy exit passes.
Exactly, and that was that was why they looked so great in Game 3 and Game 4. I mean, they made a couple tweaks. The forecheck was outstanding, and their placement of pucks were better too. If you noticed the other day, whenever the Blues chipped pucks, there was one time that Backes actually chipped a puck in the zone. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing there is that Dubnyk is so good at playing pucks playing rims that what it did is it took away their forecheck, so he would stop it, pass it off to a Suter or Brodin, and they'd be out of the zone immediately. Now they're doing little soft chips into the trapezoid where Dubnyk can't play the puck,
right.
Or they're flying them by. Or they were how many times the other night did we see Dubnyk not even leave the net on rims because they had such mustard on it, such steam on the puck where he couldn't even come out? And that was a definite adjustment that they did the other night because he was nullifying their forecheck.
Only in hockey. Rims, mustard, and steam all in the same sentence.
By the way, I was you mentioned Louis. A couple of years ago, I was in New York, and I was at a bar, and I started looking at this guy, and he looked so familiar to me, and I finally started talking to him, and I realized immediately who it was. It was this guy. He's a character actor that's in a ton of different things, and he was in the show Louis. His name's Mike Haggerty. He was like in Overboard, and he always plays always plays basically things that I can't do, like plumbing and workers and things like anything blue like white blue collar. And I was asking him, like, he was in stuff like, he did, like he'd be in Seinfeld once or Curb Your Enthusiasm once or things like that. But he was in Louis as a he was in there pretty much every episode, the one that when it was on HBO. And he told some really funny Louis C.K. movie.
Oh, man. He is so funny. There was a great comedy special a few years back where it was like Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Louis C.K., and somebody else all sat in a room and just talked about comedy. And it was great hearing their perspectives because some of them were like vulgar as anything, and Seinfeld said, will never cuss. And they talked about it was awesome. Like four of my favorite comedians.
I'm going to look up Mike Haggerty, find out some stuff he's been in.
From Wild Dad, this is along the same vein we've been talking about. What happened to cycling the puck and outlet passes? I think we talked about the outlet passes. How about cycling the puck?
Well, I mean, again, they didn't do a good job getting into the zone the other day. Basically, everything that St. Louis did to them, the Wild did the day before. I mean, they exited better, and that kept the Wild from playing fortunate. But the Wild were just everything about their game. They weren't tight in their own zone. That's where everything started the other night with just their own zone. They weren't tight. They didn't contest shots. They were soft on the boards. And also, you can't cycle pucks when guys like Stewart and Vanek are being pushed off by feathers. I mean, they've got to be stronger on the puck, man. It's just this is a work ethic series, and Hitch had a line today about this series that described it well, and of course I can't remember it, but it was essentially about how this is a workman-like series.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to work, and if you don't work, you're screwed.
From Wild Extra, we already talked about Dubnyk, so I'll go to the second half of his question. Does Yo have a quicker hook tonight than Game 4 if Dubnyk struggles?
Yeah, probably. I would think so. But, man, if they get to that point, this team's in a lot of trouble. But yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I think it's probably easier for the quick hook on the road, and also because Kemper, hey, we can all say what we want about Kemper, but he played great in Nashville, and he was good in the third period the other night.
Absolutely. From Doc, one of our regulars, playing Cook, any chance Yo is hoping to fire a physical spark in St. Louis? They play more like games 1 through 3.
Yeah, but my question is, can Cook still do it? I mean, that's the thing. He's just he doesn't look like the comfortable player that we all saw, or even last year. He looks like somebody that's got some major abdominal issues.
Yeah.
And I don't think he can get there. And I was a little surprised. I didn't think Hollow would play tonight, but I was very surprised that Schrader wasn't in. But I will say that Schrader sometimes is so lost in his own end that I just don't think Mike feels comfortable playing him in this type of series.
Right.
And I know that might be hard for a lot of the Schrader lovers out there, and I get it. He's exciting. He playmakes. There's so many things about he makes things happen, but in his own end, he just at times he's lost right now, and he needs work there. And so I think that again, it's all about trust in this game with coaches, especially in tight games. Last game, withstanding. I mean, it's about that. But I was a little surprised that I didn't see Schrader in the lineup today, and I was thinking that maybe we see Carter, but something's going on there. By the way. If you are a Wild fan, watch Chris Porter tonight, number 32, plays for the on the fourth line of the St. Louis Blues. Like, I just got this suspicion that we're going to see him in a Wild uniform next year. He's what they need. He's the fast, physical guy. He's a free agent.
He's buddies with Parisi.
He could be the Carter replacement.
He's buddies with Parisi.
He's buddies with Parisi. He's right shot. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of things to like about this guy, and I think he would. If I'm sure a number of teams might come after him. I'm sure the Wild would be one of them. And I would think that living in Minnesota and Diner or Eden Prairie, wherever the hell he lives, that he would be interested.
Rob Wilkins asked if we've heard any news on Josh Harding.
No. And a lot of people have asked me that, including Rob on Twitter, and I just, this is just one of those where he's just kind of, he wants his privacy. He's not trying to be a distraction, and I'm just trying to respect that. I mean, we all know where the end game is here. It's going to end with a retirement. There might not even be a press conference. Who knows? I mean, I cannot imagine we're ever going to see him playing hockey again.
Jason Piant. Eyes on Vandy.
Wow, he decided to join us.
Yeah,
he
missed Wednesday, and we didn't know what to do without him.
He asked me a question. I think he must have been on vacation or in Europe or something.
That's no excuse.
He asked me a question the other day on Twitter that I almost told him the RTFB.
Well, we all appreciate that answer, Michael. I want one of those shirts.
But Jason has earned the respect of being a constant reader.
Absolutely.
That I to it.
His question, what are the Wild going to do for goalies in Iowa next year?
Gustafson will leave. Gone. He will go back to Sweden. The Wild will not re-sign him. Or it actually might be vice versa. He will not re-sign with them. But the Wild will retain his rights. Then they'll have the kid they just signed, Downing. I think that's his name, right? And then they'll have to go and sign somebody. The Kemper situation, he's going to probably have to be the number 2 here or maybe traded. And then, we'll see. McCulloch right now is petitioned the NCAA to try to get an extra year of eligibility. Jim, you might remember this. There was this huge academic scandal at Harvard a couple years ago that about, a ton of athletes got basically booted. He was one of those guys, and he was technically a redshirt senior, I guess, this year, but he has asked for the NCAA for that year back. The Wild are probably thinking there's no way that the NCAA is going to give him that, but if they do, then he'll go back to Harvard. If they don't, they'll decide whether or not they re-sign him, if they sign him. And then they got this kid in is it Finland right now that's been really good, but the kid he seems to be a purer goal scorer than half the Wild forwards. He scored 2 goals in 4 days a couple weeks ago, but he's going to stay there. So the Wild will have to go sign, do what they kind of did is go, get like a John Curry type and probably put them in there with Downing, and then they'll probably draft guys, but they might sign a couple goalies. Who knows?
From Jason again, last night's result aside, how do you see the triangle of goalies playing out in Chicago next year?
My guess is that Crawford and I think it'd be Crawford, Darling, and then maybe Ranta. I'm not sure of the contract situations of all of them. I know Crawford's signed up for a while, but But my guess is that Ranta would be probably the odd guy out of those guys, and and sign somewhere else. The Wild looked at signing him a couple of years ago, and he chose them over Minnesota.
Last question from our listeners today. Wild Extra again asking, will we see any tactical adjustments tonight in regard to defending Tarasenko?
It's hard to do that on the road. My guess is no. I mean, you just gotta smother them. I mean, it's that simple. I will say this isn't like McKinnon last year, where McKinnon was just all over the ice, just roasting him. This guy's obviously scoring, but he only has 8 shots in the series, and one was an empty net goal. So it's not like he's just getting tons and tons and tons and chances. This is why I wrote that huge feature on him. He's just a guy that when he shoots, he's got a chance to score every single time. I mean, he is a special player. So I don't think they have. The second you focus too much on Tarasenko, man, you'll get killed by others. This team is that good. And so my guess is that it's just going to be, again, by committee here. I think the Wild feel comfortable that they could play in this building. If you think about it, I mean, they really could have won Game 2. They could have lost Game 1 too. So I don't want to say that the Wild, could. I don't want to do the old, early in the season when we're like, the Wild are 7-3, but they really could be 10-0.
Yeah.
This series is probably where it deserves to be, 2-2. It's exactly where I thought it would be. Now we'll see who wins the best of 3.
It was Brian Durheim. Just want to make sure I got he sent me his pronunciation, so I got that right. Brian Durheim. And his actually, there are a couple more questions I want to get to here. He said, actually, he just complimented you on your analysis on the Blues dumping the puck. Let's go to P. Cameron. Agree or disagree? Tonight will be the biggest revelation on Yo's coaching ability. Can he make the needed adjustments?
No, I mean, I don't think that that tonight is going to be the end-all, be-all on whether or not Mike Yeo could coach in this league. I mean, this is a professional sport of 2 great teams, and unfortunately they got to lock up in the first round, and somebody's going to go home. So I just think it's a matter of the players coming out. I didn't think that if they win tonight, I don't think it's Mike Yeo getting all the credit in the world, and I certainly don't think last game was all Mike. I mean, I already believe that was. It was pretty interesting seeing the irrational tweets I was getting last game.
That's
all
what
of them
Twitter's
came
for,
out.
though.
I mean, I got the Fire Yo stuff today. Somebody told me on this morning. I almost retweeted it, but I didn't want to do it to the guy. The only person that shouldn't be playing tonight is Dubnyk, and I'm like, oh my God, but the Fire Yo stuff the other day was to me hilarity at its finest. I mean, it happens, man. These aren't robots. This is pro sports. I got one tweet the other night, and I don't pay for tickets, and I would have been pissed off if I spent $300 and came to last game too. But that's the risk. That stuff happens. I don't know why it happens where teams just lay an egg collectively, but it happens. And and last game was. Started with the goalie, in my opinion, and then everything else followed suit. Like I said, I think it was very obvious the first 2 or 3 minutes that the Wild weren't starting well. Mm-hmm. But usually when they're not starting well, Dubnyk saves them.
Yep.
And just last game was a game where he also wasn't on top of his game, and that all collectively against a very hungry Blues team that I think a lot of us wondered if we were going to see. I think we were all very curious if this team would just, kind of. Hey, maybe we can get rid of the old coach, and not show up.
I heard that from a lot of very valued hockey analysts around this town. I'm talking guys who coached, played at high levels. They're all saying, well, this team just don't want to play for Hitchcock. And then they come out and they play great for him. So,
And part of the genius of Hitch is that he does stuff, your column today was so dead on, it was ridiculous, because that is Hitch. I've known him for 20 years. I've known a lot of people that play for him,
mm-hmm.
and part of his genius is not only did he spend that day before Game 4 pumping the Wild's tires to ridiculous degrees to get it into their head that how great this team is, but then he comes out and says, when he compounds it, or by then, hey, what do you need, Hitch? Well, Messier, Gretzky, a little Leary Curry would be awesome, a little Glenn Anderson. And part of that is to piss off his own team.
Absolutely.
Part of that is for David Backes and TJ Oshie and Paul Stastny and Tarasenko and Steen to open up the papers and say, "What the fuck?" Like, are you kidding me? Great, like what a shot at us, like to anger them. I mean, that is what he does. During the '99 finals, there's great stories of him in the middle of those games going in there and saying, "Oh, you guys just melting down to the point that these guys just are like, you know what? That guy.
Yeah.
We're going out there and we're playing for us, and he does. That's part of him, and it's kind of why he didn't get the Wild job, because the Wild know how great of a coach he is, and a lot of guys know how great of a coach he is, but there's an expiration date to that. Right. I mean, there's a reason why he's kind of been a lot of places, and so the Wild were concerned about that. They didn't want to get into the cycle of having to fire a coach every 3 years. They want to build and have stability, and so but that's what he does. I mean, and it's worked. He's the fourth most successful coach in the history of this league, and he keeps on reinventing himself too. I mean, he's a guy that is a very different coach now than he was years ago. I remember talking to him once years ago, like 10 years ago, and again, I've never covered him. All right, I just have a really good relationship with him, and I remember talking to him. Couldn't have been, because he was the Columbus coach, and he was telling me about how he. God, I have to learn how to text. I mean, it's the only way I can communicate with my players now, just by texting. So he's like, he's like kind of Lou Nanny, like when I taught Lou how to tweet.
Yes.
It's like, he was getting tips on how to text. I mean, it's a funny thing. You don't think about that. And for somebody to be his age and still coaching guys like, that are 20, 21, 22, that takes something special. I mean, you remember the great story about James Shepard, how excited he was to have Todd Richards come to the Wild because Todd Richards played the game. And I'm just like, Shep, you know that Jacques Lemaire is in the Hall of Fame, right? I mean, that was one of the great quotes of all time. I remember after he said it, talking to the other beat writers, like, God, should we give the kid a break and not even use the quote because it's so ridiculous? But there were so many cameras around. He basically said, I remember, I will say, Brian Murphy and I, and here's one of those I shouldn't tell.
I love these. These are my favorites.
But Brian Murphy and I, the Pioneer Press beat writer time, we're in Detroit for an exhibition game, and overtime, Shepard ran to the bench for a line change, and it was basically an odd man rush coming the other way, and I think the Wild actually were one short on the goal. And we go in, we interview him about the play after the game, and he said something like, well, at least I wasn't a minus. And we're walking away, and I said to Murph, I said, this is where, this is where probably I would not be good to work in, New York or Toronto or Montreal, because I actually have a heart. I said to Murph, I'm like, hey, kid's 19, 20 years old. You think we should just give him a break and not put that? That is just, teammates, Jacques sees that tomorrow. And Murph's like, yeah, you know what? We should give him a break.
and that's one thing. And, you talk about it like New York, and it's not that everybody in New York or Toronto or something has no heart. It's that there's so many people around.
Yeah.
You can't make discretionary decisions. Yep. When I covered beats myself, covered the Vikings, covered the Twins, most of my interviews, because there were fewer media people around back then, most of the interviews I did were one-on-one or small group.
Yep.
And then you can make a call. Okay, I'm not going to burn them on that.
Yep.
But if there are 42 people and 18 minicams around somebody, it's just free. It's all fair game. That's the way it works.
Yeah,
We're coming toward the end of Souhan Unfiltered with Michael Russo from the Scott Trade Press Box on Friday afternoon, previewing Game 5. Michael, I tell you what, nothing that happened in the series surprised me until Game 4. I expected the Wild to win one of the first two games. I expected the games to be close. I expected the Wild to play really well in Game 3. I was completely wrong about Game 4. I thought the Wild would play really well. They were terrible. Do you have a gut feeling about tonight?
I think the Wild, I really don't. This series has just been so. I never expected. I will say this. I really genuinely wondered if St. Louis would run for the hills, but even on my chat the other day, somebody asked me, do you have a prediction for the two home games? I said the Wild win one of them, and I just think again that this thing's going 7. The question is, how does it go 7? Mm-hmm. Do the Wild win tonight and lose Game 6, or do the Wild do what most of us thought, lose tonight and win Game 6 and force a Game 7? My gut says that that the Wild play much, much better tonight and rebound, but I just my guess is that the Blues win this and the Wild will have to win Sunday, and come back here for Game 7 and then do what they did in Colorado last year, which was the great drama. Winning back-to-back games and hopefully not, in overtime like that and being down 4 times in that game. Almost gave me a coronary. And you. Yeah, my guess is that St. Louis wins tonight.
Well, if we think we're going to be back here for Game 7, I think you should go talk to the Starbucks people right now.
Oh, I know.
Just set up your coffee
It's
orders.
absurd. I got to tell you though, it would be kind of funny though if the Wild win tonight but lose Game 6, just because it'd be the easy storyline, right?
It'd be awesome. It'd be fun.
Oh, the personality of this team, they got no killer instinct when they always need to just have their backs against the wall, and that's why it almost makes sense for them to win tonight and lose Game 6.
It does, and it also fits into the narrative of the series, which is that the team that's angry about the previous game is the team that wins.
Yeah.
It
would be interesting. I just hope it's a good game. No overtime.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. That's the funny thing about being a sports writer is with late deadlines, you're forced to cheer for no drama, where, when you get into the business, what you want is the drama. You want the great overtime goal to write about.
Yep.
But if a great overtime goal happens tonight, we won't be able to get it in the stinking paper.
Yep. 55 minutes from now, Devin Dubnyk, we're going to find out if he's a Vezina finalist. You think he is?
Finalist, yes.
Yep.
I don't think he wins it, but I think he's a finalist.
Yeah, I would think so too.
I think Price wins it, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
100%.
Quick one before we go. Tell me about what'd you think of the draft?
The lottery.
Yes,
Yeah, I just think it was inevitable that the Oilers would win again. I think it's a joke that they won again. I think it's scary that they won again because now this guy is a franchise turner. He is a sensational hockey player, and the Wild should be very glad they're not in that division anymore because they are going to get better. But it seems to me like the Oilers have finally figured it out. Bob Nicholson came in there from Hockey Canada to run the ship, really kind of scout out what the hell the problem was this last year. He obviously figured it out. He's getting rid of the old boys club. He got rid of Mac T. Got rid of Kevin Lowe, essentially, although he's in the business side of the Daryl Cates enterprise there. But I think it's good. I think it's you know what? Don't be surprised if Todd McClellan's next coach of that team. I think that's now the next step.
Wow.
Is that teams are realizing now. I think that what, they can't be the 80 Oilers. Defense actually means something, and we're going to see a very, very different Edmonton Oilers team, and it's going to start with maybe the best young hockey player that we're going to see in a long, long time coming out, being picked first overall in South Florida on June, 24th, 25th, 26th.
How soon does he make to the NHL?
He'll be here next
year.
Away? No question.
Wow.
Zero doubt.
Awesome.
Zero doubt.
Great stuff as always, Michael. I appreciate it. Again, this is Souhan Unfiltered at SouhanUnfiltered.com. You can listen at that website. You can listen via iHeartRadio. You can subscribe for free on iTunes. We will be back next week. Michael and I will be, depending on where the Wild are and if they're still alive and all that, we'll be doing at least one podcast next week, maybe more, maybe
and then
some from the road.
We won't be in a press box, so we could drink some Guinness. And
oh, yeah. And we'll be, and again.
And we get some LASIK.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, wouldn't that be the greatest for our sponsors? Greatest thing of all time is drinking Guinness as the anesthetic for having LASIK.
That would be like the Valium.
And we'll do it in an Irish pub. That's awesome. We'll get a big old operating table at the Liffey, drink Guinness, and then have LASIK together.
Yes.
And we'll wear slacks. Let's wear slacks. Talk to you soon.